So earlier this year, we lost a very dear friend and colleague, Martin Burns, very suddenly. And shortly afterwards, I saw his wife, Lucy, tweet, I think to Agile on the beach, kind of because Martin was due to speak there. And I think Lucy was kind of saying, well, can I take his place? And I thought, hey, you know what, Lucy, if you would be willing to come down and talk to us about Martin and lead Dr. Brightle, that would be fantastic. And she agreed. So this may be a bit emotional. There are volunteers around with tissues if people need them. But I'm going to hand over to Chris now.
Okay, hi everyone, yeah, I'm on. So this is going to be a pretty unique session. I have never been to a conference which had a session like this before. As Carl said, there will potentially be some tears. Hopefully there will be some laughter. We'll try and keep it lighthearted. I'm not sure about you guys, but I will be having a whiskey. I think Lucy will join me with whiskey as well. There's whiskey afterwards. We have a pile of glasses and some bottles if you'd like to come up after Carl's closing comments for the conference and share a drink with us. That would be great. What we're going to do is we're going to tell stories. We're going to tell some stories about Martin. Not necessarily so you can mourn with us and mourn with the community, but more you can take inspiration from the things that Martin did. We can continue his story, continue the things that he taught us. I'm going to be like Wogan. So I'm going to be like, it's going to be like a bit of a chat show. Do you remember Wogan? The millennials, heard of Wogan? Think Graham Norton, but like just a bit more middle of the road. So we're going to have some guests up. We're going to have a film director who's going to join us. We're going to have a gentleman who I think has got the best name in the room. Carl Scotland. This is going to go well. And then we're going to have some superheroes. They're going to be back up here and they're going to join us. However, our main guest for the next hour is Lucy Burns. Is it working? It's not working. Oh no. It's not working. That's supposed to be Shirley Temple dancing. Friend Kylie sort of sent that to me and said that's something that will get Lucy laughing. So I first met Lucy in 2015 and helped her organise, well I didn't help really, I was there, and she organised the Safe Leadership Retreat, and then after, that was like 2015, after the Safe Leadership Retreat, Lucy joined me to organise Lean Agile Scotland for a couple of years. She kept me sane. I'm not sure I helped at all with her sanity because everything used to just be in my head and now I had to tell somebody else. I had to organise this together. Lucy organised some conferences, then she joined in as part of the community, not just as an event organiser, but she's learning, she's developing her skills and is joining in as an integral part of our community as well. She gave her first conference talk last week at Lean Agile Scotland about Kanban. And I guess one of my fondest memories of Lucy is in 2015 at Lean Agile Scotland, we got a gong, a massive gong, you know, like the Metro Golden Ware type gong, and we thought that'd be really cool to summon people to talks, and Lucy just had so much fun with it, smashing it all the time, getting people out of the way. It's my turn, I'm going to smash it. So, if you'd like to welcome up Lucy Burns. Sorry, that's supposed to. Okay, Lucy, before we get started, let's see who knew Martin. Put your hands up if you knew Martin. Yeah? Put your hand up if you shared a conversation with Martin, either online or in person. Yeah? A few of you. If you experienced the joy of his company in real life, sat with him. Fantastic.
It's getting smaller.
If you argued with him.
I think
if you argued with him about safe. If you repeatedly argued with him about safe. Okay, let's have a seat. So, Lucy, you introduce Martin to our audience, tell us a little bit about him.
Martin was a big man. In more ways than one, he was a big man. If you had a cuddle from him, you knew you had a cuddle from him. He was big. He wore a beautiful tweed waistcoat when he was talking at conferences, this one. He introduced at Lean Agile Scotland pronoun badges. So his would say, hi, my pronouns are he and him. And he did that off his own back. He paid for all the badges. He did that to make other people comfortable, to introduce their pronouns. And at the beginning of every talk, he would give his pronouns. He would argue about the spelling of whiskey. It was spelled whiskey, not whiskey, okay?
Correct, yes.
Also, the pronunciation of scone or scone. It was scone.
Scone.
Scone, yep. And he was a family man. He has 3 children, 2 cats, and loved them all.
So when Martin passed, I think a number of us noticed and that there was a huge number of messages you received on social media. Could you tell us a little bit about the messages, what you experienced?
It was incredible. The Agile community, the outpouring of comments from the Agile community absolutely overwhelmed me. My phone pinged and pinged and pinged for weeks with people telling me stories, people wanting to share their grief and mine. So off the back of that, I started to realize that there were some themes through that. People would often say, I wouldn't be doing the job I'm doing if it wasn't for Martin. He made time for me, he helped me, he shared, and he had a huge knowledge, and he had a desire to continue learning and wanted everyone else to learn along with him. When he was talking about conferences, he always said the best learnings from conferences were the conversations you had in the corridors. And people told me stories, and we're going to share a few of those stories today.
Yeah. So we met for the first time after Martin passed an event in Glasgow, an Agile Scotland event, and you talked about themes, and you touched on a number of the themes there. So the themes that came out through the messages you received and were listener, learner and sharer, arguer, helper, and community builder. So what we're going to do is, as I said, we're going to invite up to the stage a number of guests to talk through each of these themes. So before we do that, though, could you tell us a little bit about the first theme of listener?
So I was struggling a bit for this, to get an appropriate story for listener, but then I went back to my original story that was my conference talk last week. So it was the first time I was organising an event. It was the Safe Leadership Retreat. We were living in Sweden. We were organising an event for over 50 people in Scotland, which is why Chris was involved, because we needed someone in Scotland. And it was overwhelming. I had too much to do, and I went to him and said, I can't do this. I absolutely cannot do this. It was just no give or take. And he listened, and he did what every husband would do. He drew me a Kanban board. I could tell you more about that, but you have to go to my talk for that. But I was thinking about other people's stories as well, and one of my colleagues at RBS has given me this story, so forgive me for reading, but this is someone else's words. This is my colleague, Matt. I wanted help with understanding different options for prioritizing work. It was suggested I have a chat with Martin. I sent him a message, and he was more than happy to have a chat over coffee. When I got there, he was great with me, very understanding and really keen to get all the background info on what I was doing and what he wanted to achieve. What I needed was WSGIF. That was clear. Not only did Martin make WSGIF easily understood, we discussed plenty of other options, their merits and their negatives as well, as many other options to help my team. This was brilliant. I had what I needed and more. However, as the time went on and we'd covered everything and more, Martin asked where I was going. I said I was going to head back to my desk. Martin disagreed and said I should hang about as it was 2 o'clock on a Monday and Lean Coffee was about to start. And now I can get the wider group's view on prioritization as well as a bunch of other stuff. That to me was the thing with Martin. He didn't just help transactionally, he continued to help more and more, always welcomed you in whilst doing so. I learned so much from Martin, from big room planning, WSGIF, clean language, the 0, 1, TFB scale, and more. And that was Martin. It would, yeah.
So Chris, or we call him Peter Jackson now, I think, is going to come up and tell us a little story about his experience with Martin and listening. And over there, this is what you've got to look forward to, an older Peter Jackson. Not quite like Gandalf, I'm sure you won't get that. Okay, so Chris, tell us a little bit about the listening Martin that you experienced.
So, as some of you may have noticed, I'm not always engaged in repetitive conversations, and from time to time I like to find my own space and get my own distance. Martin helped me learn to acknowledge that what is signal and noise can vary from person to person, and we have to be mindful of that, respectful of it. It was at the party at y'all's house. It had been a good conference, but the conversation had become a bit circular. I wasn't gaining from it, and I drifted off to play guitar. I love playing guitar. I love playing blues guitar, and Martin had a lot of really nice guitars, a lot of nice amps. There was a piano in there. I don't know what all else. And the group had definitely noticed I had drifted away and were trying to pull me back in. So people were coming in and out while I was playing guitar by myself and asking me if I'd had something to eat. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Do you want a beer? Yeah, I'll take a beer. I can play guitar and drink a beer at the same time, believe it or not. And I could sense the frustration, but was comfortable where I was at. Finally, Martin came into the room and did what I needed. He paid attention with all his senses, right? He saw what I was doing, and he picked up a guitar and he jammed with me. That was it. Who plays a guitar in here? We got a few. Cool. So it's an odd thing to get into a groove with someone when you're jamming out. You really have to listen and pay attention, and there's a call and a response and a give and a take. And it takes patience. You've got to be willing to engage. And we had slightly stylistic differences. But Martin took the time and the space to play with me. That's all I needed at the time. It was just someone to come play with me a little bit. And at that point, sure enough, I was finally ready to come back into the kitchen and play werewolf, I think, was the next step of that. So those are what I learned from Martin, that what's signal and what's noise can vary from person to person. You really need to pay attention with all your senses to be mindful of that. And sometimes listening and not listening are complementary. Maybe it's not words, maybe it's not your ears. Maybe you just need to sit down and engage with somebody with where they're at and what they're doing at the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris.
Slange.
So the other theme, the next theme, I guess that was prominent was Martin as a learner. And Martin as a learner and a sharer. I once introduced him at a Lean Agile Glasgow event as the person who had read all the Lean books, all of them. If there's a book on Lean, he'd read it. And if he hadn't read it, you told him about it, he'll have it read like within a week. He just devoured all of the Lean material. So what was Martin's bookshelf like?
Like this. So for this bit, what Chris pointed me to was Martin has a Goodreads account, and I had a good look at it. Apparently you can export all the information, so that was pretty cool. So he had 236 books listed on Goodreads that he'd added since 2012. 176 of those were marked as read. Our house was always full of books. We moved to Sweden for a year and a half, and as part of that move, we got rid of probably 1,000 books because we couldn't take them with us. I think we've probably bought them all again since. So I moved recently, and so suddenly all his books have now come together again on the shelves because they were spread all over the house. And so this is what the shelves look like now. And this isn't including the Kindle, because I'm sure he always took his Kindle traveling with him, and I'm sure there's lots more on there. And he didn't just read books, he devoured books. He would highlight them. He would write in the white bits. What do you call it? The edge of the book.
Margins.
Oh, brain. Sorry. He would write in the margins of the books. And one example is we've both got a copy of Melissa Perry's book. His copy is in pieces. It's just dog-eared. Mine's beautiful and pristine. And that was what he was like with books, and he would lend them out. So I'm sure that there's actually more books from his shelf that are out in the wild somewhere. So, story to tell about this is the week after Martin died, Mike Burrows contacted me, and I know he spoke here last year. And his book, Right to Left, was literally about to print, and he halted the printing because he wanted to dedicate this book to Martin. So I got a copy of his book, not this one, because somebody's going to win this one, but I got a copy of his book, and I read at the front, dedicated to Martin. I thought that was it. And then a few days later, I was flicking through it, thinking I might actually read this at some point, and realized there's a whole section at the back about Martin. So I'm going to read you part of that. He is listed as a reviewer, but I should expand here on his specific contribution to Chapter 4. This, the chapter most likely to generate controversy, was the one I most wanted to get right. Martin was one of several members of the SAFE community who were able to confirm in that context what I already knew for Scrum, namely the very real tension between the left to right and right to left perspectives articulated in that chapter and the one preceding. Moreover, he was supportive both publicly and privately, including in his client engagements, with regard to outcome orientation generally and agenda shift specifically. More than anyone else, Martin gave me the confidence to take this chapter as far as I could. Those who knew him would not be surprised by his vocal support for two frameworks that to some eyes might appear to be in opposition. Passionate debate was in his nature, and we'll come on to that later. So too was an optimistic attitude towards people. He was extraordinarily people positive.
Lucy took the data from Goodreads and created word clouds, and you can see how over the years how Martin's his thinking and his reading changed and evolved. So when my first contact with Martin was in 2012 when I put out the call for papers for Lean Agile Scotland, and I got in touch and said, I want to speak at your conference. Can I speak at your conference? He was working for a large organisation at the time and had to do the whole thing where you put your slides and your whole talk proposal through the ringer. I think it was IBM. And his submission came in about 2 days late after the closure of the CFP. But it was brilliant. What Martin was talking about in 2012, I think I saw us start talking about again in 2015. He was very, very interested in A3 thinking, very interested in Hoshin Connery and strategy deployment. So we see Lean in 2012, Lean again, and we can start to see some Agile coming up. More Lean, as I said, he devoured every single Lean book.
That was the year we moved to Stockholm. Did you see that?
Was that?
We moved to Stockholm.
Stockholm.
He was obviously reading books about Stockholm.
Agile started to appear in 2015. There was a lot of some more Agile. It's still Lean. He's devouring every single piece of literature on Lean and teams. And then you can see it change into organizations, change communities, etc. Leadership, options, and we spoke a lot about Edgar Schein in the last few months. He also went to conferences. So what part did conferences play, Lucy?
He went to lots of conferences, Chris. He put CFPs in for every conference going, I think, in the Northern Hemisphere. I think he would have tried the Southern Hemisphere too if I'd let him. But he began to run into a problem when, about 2015, I started to work full-time, and suddenly I was in the same field as him, so I was starting to go to conferences more and more as well, which with 3 children and 2 cats meant that suddenly he had to ask permission, which he'd never done before. So that was really interesting. And instead of saying, I'm going away for these dates and adding it to the calendar, now he had to say, is it okay? And sometimes I said no. And sometimes we were both at the same conference, so we would tag team. One of us would go for the first day, one for the second day, because of course we had to be back for the kids. So it was all about give and take. There was one incident. He was speaking, I think, in Bristol, but the week before he was in the States. And he had to fly in from the States to Bristol, which would have been fine, except his talk that time was on music, and he needed his guitar. So I had to get the guitar couriered to Bristol. Oh, that was a hoo-ha. But Lean Agile Scotland was his favourite. It was coming home. He spoke at every single Lean Agile Scotland, except for this year. And he actually put in a CFP for Lean Agile Scotland and didn't get in. whereas I did. So that was interesting. We found out while we were in Venice that I'd got in. He was like, well done, and refreshing his phone, like, oh, he was a bit put out. I said, don't worry, you can use my discount code. Didn't go down well. When he died, Carl touched on this. I was offered some of his speaking opportunities. Agile on the Beach was due to happen in July. He died in the May, and they messaged me saying I think I caught an email, so I just tweeted them and said, can I have his slot? And they said, yes, of course, come down. I didn't. It was too soon. It was a bit silly. I was trying to build a family holiday around it, but it was too soon, too raw. But Carl invited me to this one, and I've also been invited to speak at Bergen in the Booster Conference, which he regularly spoke at, and it's humbling. It's a privilege to follow in his footsteps, but also I'm starting to make my own way, and I don't want to just step in his footsteps. I want to make my own way, not just be his wife. But it's interesting.
Okay, let's invite another guest up. Carl is going to tell us a story about some sharing, some conversations he had with Martin around A3 thinking.
You kind of teed my story up quite nicely there, actually. I wish I'd seen your slides. I first got to know Martin when he reached out to me. So he just emailed me, and I've been trying to find those emails, and I can't. So it was when I was at Rally, so it must have been to my Rally email address. So I started off with Agile, and then through Agile discovered Lean. Martin was the other way around. So Martin was primarily Lean, and that kind of really showed up in that word cloud. Mm-hmm. And from the Lean, got involved in the Agile community. So there's this nice overlap, which must have been when I was at Rally. And Rally, we were doing A3 thinking and strategy deployment, Ocean Cannery, the X Matrix, and I was getting very excited about this stuff and blogging about it and writing about it and talking about it. And Martin just emailed me and said, hey, it's cool, let's talk. And we had an exchange of emails, and that was the thing we had in common, I think, from then on, the Lean side of things and the A3 sides of things. So I think what I remember is just that way he would reach out to people and talk to people, and if he sensed that you had something in common, he would share that with you. He didn't just kind of keep himself to himself and keep his knowledge to himself. I'm sure we'll touch on community later, but I think there's a strong overlap there as well.
Indeed. Thanks, Carol. Thank you. Sorry, before you go, is there any kind of takeaways? I guess you've just given us.
I think, yeah, it was that he would reach out to people. It was the fact that he emailed me, and we didn't really know each other, but he was quite willing to make contact with me and have that conversation.
Fantastic, thank you. So we're going to talk about Martin the Arguer. When we were preparing the talk, Lucy, you mentioned West Wing, and it immediately kind of came to my mind. He always talked about Jet Bartlett. He always referenced Jet Bartlett, and Jet would do it this way, and Jet would say that. But there's another story from the West Wing that you can tell us about Martin and arguing, and might open up some for us.
So Martin liked to argue. He saw it as a way to further discussion. It wasn't just for the sake of arguing, although sometimes it was. He saw it as a good thing. He would often argue for something that he didn't necessarily believe in, just so that the argument would be balanced. You know, he liked to support the underdog. Even if he didn't agree with the argument, he would fight for it, and infuriating sometimes. But that's who he was. And as you said, over the years, we watched West Wing late into the night. Just one more episode. You know what it's like. It's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. You're still watching the West Wing. But we were talking about Martin, and we're talking about arguing, and I remember this one scene from one of the episodes. So it's early on in season 1, and Sam, who's one of the president's speechwriters, is trying to impress his boss's daughter, Mallory. She's a school teacher and is passionate about children getting the best education. Sam has written a speech on school vouchers, and Mallory is furious with him. She shows up and tells Sam, I despise you and everything you stand for. The argument continues through the episode, through different scenes, leading up to Sam asking her on a lunch date. So Mallory goes to her father, Leo, and asks, is it okay if I have lunch with a fascist? At that point, Leo, her father, tells her that Sam is really not in favour of school vouchers. It was opposition research for him. And that's what Martin did. He would balance an argument just because it needed saying. The other argument needed pitching. He would argue, but he would counter it. He would also argue for things that he was really passionate about, which I'm sure we're about to come on to.
Yeah. So, as some of us, you may remember some of the conversations that Martin would have with our next guest on Twitter. I think I remember some conversations we had around about Twitter where we said, when are they going to implement mute thread? When are they going to give us our timelines back? Because when our next guest and Martin took to Twitter, they went at it, and there was lots of material appearing there quickly. So we did ask Dean Leffingwell, but Dean Leffingwell couldn't make it, so he sent the head of sales and marketing for SAI to come and join us, Sir Dave Snowden.
May not get forgiven for that one.
I'll put it away. There's a better picture.
Okay, so kind of like three memories. Martin and I started an ongoing debate about SAFE after I got really angry at a conference in Poland the first time I encountered the diagram, and wrote a very quick blog post which was SAFE, the infantilization of management. And Martin jumped on me within about 15 minutes of my posting that, all right? And it carried on. And I still remember it was the 1st of August 2017. I was in the middle of a round and through Wales walk, which I did to celebrate coming back to health. And I got to a really boring piece which involved walking 10 miles on a road to Carnarvon. Yeah? And I thought, I'm really bored. Well, I wonder if Martin would come out to play. So I sort of tweeted, all right, one of my favorite tweets, which SAFE is to agile, what Six Sigma is to innovation, what SharePoint is to knowledge management, and waited. And it took about 3 minutes. And actually, my average speed, it was a 17.5-mile walk. My average speed dropped from an average of 2.9 to 2.4 because I had to keep stopping to deal with Martin. Right? And then the second thing shortly after that was the Lean Agile Scotland event, and Martin came up to me and he said, Lucy's really worried we're going to have a fight. We're okay, aren't we? Right? I haven't told you that one before. Right? And we were both saying, well, actually, we're really quite enjoying this. Yeah. And then that glorious dinner we had, which I still remember.
That's the photo behind you now.
Which is coming up. And for me, it was a really good weekend. It was an excellent conference that you organised. Wales beat Scotland on the way to the Grand Slam, and all four of us had dinner. And I think that was a great conversation. And I think, the key thing about Martin, it was dissent without rancor. And you don't find many people you can do that with. So that's the memory.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. So the next thing we're going to move on to is helper. You told me, I could tell you hundreds of stories. I've got a blog post I wrote shortly after Martin passed, and it's thanks for helping. Just a series of little kind of small stories about how he helped me and how I kind of returned the favour over the years in the broader community and the kind of agile community in Scotland. But you told me a great story as we're preparing for this about how Martin helped someone with their career over 20 years ago and helped them completely change their career. Yeah,
so 20 years ago or so, Martin was part of a group called Evolve. So it's originally it was an online mailing list. And we used to hang out. I joined that just socially. And that group, many of them are still my friends. 4 of them are godparents to our children. 1 is my IT support. And what I'm going to tell you now is Elva's story. So Elva's on this picture. She's Iceland's coolest lawyer. So this is Elva's story. I met him on a mailing list over 20 years ago. He was part of a group of people that completely changed my life. His knowledge, skills, wit, and fantastically sarcastic humor were few of the things that drew me to him. He was an intellect, the type you feel you can trust, the type I admire, and I admired him. He cared for us collectively, but equally he cared for us individually. You would feel it in his belief in you, and he has helped many of us believing in ourselves, helped making us stronger, bigger, better. I was in law school when we met, and when we talked about my future, my vision for my future, he encouraged me to think bigger, be bolder. My vision was cybercrime as a prosecutor. His was broader. He is the person that pushed me into the field of privacy and e-commerce. He told me there's no money in cybercrime unless you are the criminal, which I had no intention of being. He guided me gently towards corporate law, the tech side of corporate law. And there I sit today on the top of the world, strategizing and assisting corporations with tech law compliance, including privacy, building on the project and human management skills I picked up from him in a diverse group of strong-minded intellects, reading the room, being the nerd he encouraged me to embrace, and daring to be a besserwisser, a know-it-all. When I know that I know what I'm talking about, I'm not afraid of being strong, of being all that I am and can be because of my experience with the Vault, including Martin.
Okay, shall we invite up our next guest to tell us? So, just a warning, our next superhero talked this morning about a cape. We all know no capes, okay? No capes. You can be a superhero, but no capes. So, Kat Svittel is going to talk to us a little bit about Martin the Helper.
All right. Yeah, I feel like everyone else's story was really lighthearted and fun, and mine is very much not. I told it at Lean Agile Scotland, and the first 4 rows of the room cried. So 7 years ago, right when I was starting a family, something very bad happened to me, and it was really the culmination of a series of horrible things. And as a result of that, I basically lost my community, or I thought, until I got a message, one from Chris, one from Martin. I'd never met these people in real life. I only knew them online. And Martin was not just telling me that, oh, I'm sorry this bad thing happened to you, but in typical Martin fashion, he was like, yeah, I'm sorry this bad thing happened to you, but more importantly, you're going to stick around, right? And, he was interested in me continuing my work and continuing to participate in the field, and it made me go from this place where I was just like, I'm done with this. I'm going to find a new job. I have a finance degree. I don't have to do anything in tech, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of gave me the push to keep doing what I love and keep participating in the tech industry. And so I guess I owe my keynote this morning and all the other great stuff that I've been able to do over the past 7 years to Martin. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kat. Okay, let's keep it together. Let's talk a bit about Martin, the community builder. So, Martin, I spent many hours with Martin at community events, loads and loads of different community events. Loads of times sitting in really not so nice pubs in Glasgow with a pile of post-it notes in front of us doing lean coffees at Lean Agile Glasgow, and some rather drunk Ouijas, as we call them, staring at us going, what are these, who are these people? We spent a lot of time at conferences together, but I wonder if Lucy could tell us a bit more about what the role community played in Martin's life.
So the Safe Leadership Retreats were the first time I organised events. And he got involved in that because he was an advocate of SAFE, we know that. But he insisted that there needed to be a community as part of it. It couldn't just be all boring rubbish stuff. So he suggested, let's have a Safe Leadership Retreat. And everyone was like, that's a fantastic idea, go away and do it. So that's how I got involved in events, because he looked pitiful and I helped. So we ran 3 Safe Leadership Retreats in Scotland, Canada and Scotland. Off the back, we stopped doing them. Off the back of that, Scaled Agile Inc. now have a community day added on to their annual SAFE summits. But it wasn't just the SAFE community where he built community. It was locally. When he worked at RBS for a while as a contractor, and he had in his diary blocked out a morning slot every day of the week for fika. So for those of you who don't know, fika is the Swedish verb to drink coffee, eat cinnamon buns, and talk. Is that fair, Gitta? Yeah,
Yep.
there we go. So he had that in his diary for every day, and it wasn't just him. It was left there purposefully. So if someone said, I need to talk about, or can you help me with, and he would say, let's go for coffee. And that's what he did. He would go for coffee. And he did the same at lunch. He blocked out a whole hour at lunchtime. Again, it was, I need help, let's have lunch. That was his approach to anything. It wasn't just, oh, let me type your response. It was deeper than that. He had to go and talk to someone. He had to go and understand what the problem was and help. Lean Agile Scotland was a big part of our lives, we know that. But it wasn't just talking there and working there. Oh no, we had to also host the after party. So when I worked at the conference, helping Chris and Mark, and Martin was talking, we still had 3 kids and 2 cats. So we again had to tag team who's going to be home tonight, who's home. So on the Friday, we compromised and hosted the party. So everyone came to us, which meant we didn't need a babysitter, and we could both drink. It was perfect. Unfortunately, it meant we would have between 40 and 80 people in our house. And it took a lot of preparation, but it was good fun. The first year, there were stories of him pushing people into taxis and just giving the address to the driver and off you go. And people would turn up, and as they turned up, I would get them to do things. You're going to be barmaid for the night. You're going to make a pavlova. You're going to light all the candles. And that was really important to him. And then he'd go and hang with Chris and play the guitar. And I'm pretty sure you were there a few times as well. And as the night wore on, we inevitably ended up playing werewolf. And I think that leads into our next guest, doesn't it?
Yes, I believe our next guest is Simon. Is going to our final superhero join us. Member of our Justice League is going to tell us a little story.
Hello. Sorry about that. So, gosh, where did I start with Martin? I first met Martin online, actually. It was October 2014. I was on Twitter, as I normally am. I was in the middle of a conversation. Suddenly these words came booming across, which, if I remember rightly, if you're not buying the product, you are the product. And it was Martin. And so then we got into a discussion on monopoly, the state of experts, the monarchy, and then a lot of mocking of Shropshire. I never understood quite why that was. And then the conversation continued much later. We got into Death Star project management techniques, concepts of combining Lean, Agile, and Six Sigma all together. Wonderful projects like Waggerful, but just adding words together. And then I eventually ended up speaking at Lean Agile Scotland, and also speaking, I was the Chaos Monkey, the person designed to cause trouble, at the SAFE Leadership Retreat. I must admit, it was my first introduction into SAFE, and my first and last, I have to say. But Martin was fantastic at building bridges and bringing communities together. I've got to say, without Martin, probably the mapping stuff, which I know has been picked up quite a bit in some of the Lean Agile communities, probably would never have happened. So I have to be very grateful for that. But one of the best things is Martin, we used to have quite robust discussions. I heard others talking about this, always friendly, always spirited, particularly about politics, and normally in an armchair with something spirited in the hand as well. But my favorite moment is he was warm of not only heart but also home, was the parties, where I used to love to play a game of werewolf. Anybody here do werewolf? I'm sorry, I'm terribly, I love narrating. As Martin was wonderfully kind, but also not very good, because he was so kind-hearted, we'd know he was the werewolf. Just couldn't help himself. He just didn't want to eat all the villagers. But I was desperately trying to think of words to say, and I was actually outside having a smoke, and of course it's all quite stormy out there at the moment, and it reminded me of some words by Martin's namesake, the Bard of Ayrshire, as we call him, and if I'm terribly bad at doing these things, but if a man's judgment can be clear, I'm not a poet, you see, to others guide the course to steer, and he himself runs a life's mad career as wild as the waves. Those words always summed up to me what Martin was. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. We're about there. Almost made it. Chris has been collecting some of the comments, some of the takeaways as we've been going along, and we're hoping that Keynote plays along with us and lets us kind of share them back with you. Yes, it does. There we go. Let me just hit play. Where's play going? Up there. Okay. So this is what we've got. So it's inspired by Martin. What's signal and what's noise can vary for people. Pay attention with all your senses. Martin did that. Actions can speak. Listen louder than words. Reach out to people in different communities. Find shared interest. Dissent with anger makes for fun arguing. Check up on old friends. Invite them back. Invite a chaos monkey to dinner. Yeah, always have someone there who can help shake things up about. And don't tell them you're the wolf. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Lucy.